So, how do we make sure our government policies, in education, healthcare, fighting poverty, how do we know they actually work? For decades, the answer seemed pretty simple: use science. But what if the gold standard of that science has some pretty serious flaws? Let's get into it.
We're starting with this quote from Nobel laureate Angus Deaton because, wow, it just perfectly captures the huge uncertainty that policymakers are up against. For so long, we've been pouring billions into all sorts of programs without really knowing if they're doing any good. And that is the exact problem that this massive intellectual movement tried to solve.
And that movement was called evidence-based policy. The idea was nothing short of a revolution in how we make decisions, moving away from just intuition or tradition or plain old guesswork. Now, what's really fascinating here is how this whole idea spread. It actually kicked off in medicine back in the early 90s. You had doctors saying, hey, we need hard data, not just personal experience. And then, by the 21st century, that same thinking just exploded into social policy, education, and economics, with people promising it could revolutionize social policy just like it did for medicine.
And you can see why the promise was so appealing. I mean, who could argue with it, right? Let's stop relying on gut feelings and political ideology. Instead, let's build our policies on a solid foundation of rigorous, objective, scientific proof. It sounds like the ultimate common sense solution. But to do that, you need a tool. You need a method so reliable, so trustworthy, that you could put it above everything else. And for the evidence-based policy movement, that tool became the Randomized Controlled Trial, or what everyone calls the RCT. The concept itself is actually pretty simple, but it's incredibly powerful. You take a group of people and basically, like flipping a coin, you randomly assign some of them to get a new program, let's say a new teaching method. The rest of them, the control group, they don't get it. And since they were all assigned by pure chance, any difference you see in their outcomes, like test scores, has to be because of the program. It just elegantly cuts through all the other noise and confounding factors. And its hierarchy of evidence, wow, it just brilliantly shows how important RCTs became. Just look at this thing. Right there at the very top, category I, what do you see? RCTs. And where are the expert opinions and personal experience? Way, way down at the bottom, in category 4. This framework basically crowned RCTs as the undisputed king of evidence. So here's the bottom line. If you wanted to get a top-grade, grade A recommendation for a new policy, you had to have evidence from a randomized controlled trial. Period. No other kind of evidence was going to cut it. It truly became the gold standard. To really get why this was such a game changer, you have to look at the before picture. The old methods were, well, messy. Researchers had to make a ton of assumptions, which other experts would often call incredible and not in a good way. The field was notorious for data mining. I mean, one analysis found over 145 different variables had been claimed as the key to economic growth. RCTs promised to just slice right through all that noise and give you a clean, credible answer. But, and you knew there was a but coming, right? What if that gold standard wasn't so pure after all? As RCTs got used more and more in the complicated, messy world of social science, some pretty serious cracks started to show. So if this method is so powerful and clean, what could possibly be the problem? Well, it turns out the real world is a lot messier than a sterile laboratory. Okay, so first off, that magic of randomization, it works perfectly with infinitely large groups. But in social science, your trials are often way smaller. And that means, just by dumb luck, your groups might not be perfectly balanced. You could end up with more women in one group, for example. Now, you can try to adjust for things you know about, like gender, but what about all the stuff you don't know about? And the real irony is, this often forces researchers right back to using the same old complex stats they were trying to get away from in the first place. The second huge issue really comes down to these 3 letters: ATE. This stands for the average treatment effect, and it's the main result that an RCT spits out. So what's the big deal with that? Well, the ATE tells you what worked on average across the whole group. But policymakers don't care about the average person. They care about whether a program will work in their specific village for their specific student. An average positive result could even be hiding the fact that the program was actually harmful to a smaller group of people. And all this leads to what might be the biggest critique of all, the black box problem. See, an RCT is fantastic at telling you that a program had an effect, but it's a total black box when it comes to telling you why it worked. It doesn't show you the mechanism underneath. And if you don't know why something worked, how on earth can you know if it's going to work somewhere else? This is the huge problem of external validity. A program that does wonders in one place, like giving out free bed nuts in Uganda, might totally flop somewhere else, like India, because of tiny cultural or economic differences. The RCT itself gives you absolutely no way to figure that out. So you put all this criticism together, and it leads to this fundamental dilemma, a real intellectual trap for researchers and policymakers who are just trying to do the right thing. They find themselves stuck in what's been called a methodological cul-de-sac. It feels like no matter which way they turn, they just hit a brick wall. And this slide just lays out the dilemma perfectly. Take path 1. You let economic theory guide your work. The problem? Your causal claims are often seen as incredible because the theories themselves are uncertain and often conflict with each other. Okay, so what about path 2? You go theory-free and just run an RCT. The problem there? Your results might be solid for that one experiment, but they don't generalize because you have no idea why it worked. Either way, you're stuck. So where does that leave us? Do we just give up? No, not at all. It just means we need to get a lot smarter. It means we have to start rethinking what evidence really means. And here we are back with Angus Deaton, who just nails the new way of thinking. He says the very thing that made RCTs seem so great, the fact that they were theory-free, is actually their biggest weakness. Without some kind of theory to guide it, an experiment's findings are probably just stuck in the one place they were found. And this is the most important takeaway. The solution isn't to just throw out the gold standard. RCTs are an incredibly valuable tool. The goal is to be smarter about how we use them, to integrate them with economic theory, with qualitative data, with all kinds of other evidence to build a much more complete and useful picture. Which brings us right to our final thought. We started by asking, what works? And we were told the answer was RCTs, the best evidence. But we've seen it's way too simple. The real challenge, the much more interesting question we should be asking now, is how can we skillfully weave together all of our tools, experiments, theory, expertise, to finally build policies that we know will actually make a difference?